Before students can learn how to form words and sentences, they need to have an understanding of the prosody of language. Prosody is extremely important in properly conveying the speaker's message and intention to the listener, as said by Celsey, Mercia, and Ulstein. Prosody is often described as the poetry of language. It deals with the rhythm and pattern of sounds as defined by the Merriam-Webster Dictionary. Prosody covers a large area of suprasegmental features such as intonation contours, like pitch patterns, along with syllable stress and length and pauses. According to McNerney and Mendelssohn, as cited in Celsey, Mercia, and Ulstein, pronunciation should focus first and foremost on suprasegmentals, as they have the greatest impact on the comprehensibility of the learner's English. It not only improves the learner's comprehensibility, but is also less frustrating for students because greater change can be effected. Due to the information in this quote, we have focused our lesson on intonation and sentence types. Native English speakers can pick out different cues in intonation and rhythm to determine how to proceed in the conversation. By learning this prosodic element, we are not intending to have the students sound like native speakers. Rather, we are trying to help them to be easily understood. Gilbert believes that the most basic elements of speaking are deeply personal. The way we speak and sound reflects our culture and environment. Without grasping the intonation of the language, the non-native speakers of English will never truly connect with the natives or feel as if they have become one with their surroundings. According to Rodero, intonation is a vehicle for communication, which sometimes contributes greater meaning than the semantic content of speech itself. In her study, she found that the most read emotions derived from the intonation of the speaker were sadness, joy, calmness, and anxiety. It is also important to teach our students what these sound like in context, to ensure that they are conveying the right emotion at the right time. If English language learners are not taught these skills, they will be unable to properly communicate, and there will be, as Gilbert says, a resulting conversational breakdown. In the words of Led Zeppelin, communication breakdown, it's always the same. Having a nervous breakdown drive me insane. In other words, without teaching our students the prosodic element of intonation, they will be unable to communicate effectively and thus feel frustrated and like outsiders. As Haffernick stated, it is necessary to teach our students how to communicate effectively. It is also our goal as instructors to ease students into the language so that they feel welcome in their new roles as English speakers. Additionally, Celsey, Mercia, and Ulstein feel that in order to deploy intonation effectively at the level of discourse, learners need first to become aware of, understand, and practice the relationships between intonation, syntax, and context in spoken English. They give 6 different types that are commonly used throughout the English language and are essential to practice, including declaratives, imperatives and exclamations, yes-no questions, WH questions, question tags, and alternative questions. Without the basic understandings of these sentence types, it is believed by Celsey, Mercia, and Ulstein that the learner will not be able to use intonation effectively at the more global discourse level when speaking or listening. It is our job as teachers to ensure that our students understand these 6 different sentence types and the intended intonation that is associated with them. With this understanding, students will have the best opportunity for effective and meaningful communication. In our following lesson, Matthew will go into further detail about intonation and sentence types.
Today we're going to be looking at prosody. As you know, prosody is the way a whole phrase comes across in context in a whole statement. Not just one word or one syllable, it's the entire phrasing of a sentence. And it includes these four elements: the thought group, the focus word, the stress, and the peak. The information I'm reviewing today was provided by Judy B. Gilbert from her 2008 work, Teaching Pronunciation Using the Prosody Pyramid, published by Cambridge University Press out of New York, New York. At the bottom, we have the thought group. English does not flow smoothly. It is grouped and often words are spoken in spurts. These chunks of words are the speaker's thoughts. Prosodic markers include a pause, a drop in pitch, or lengthening the last stressed syllable. In general, a pitch drop means the end, and there is a relationship between the degree of finality and the size of the drop. For instance, a slight drop in intonation typically marks the end of a thought group within a sentence. A bigger drop marks the end of a sentence or an entire comment. A major drop indicates, I have finished my remarks, and it is now your turn to speak. Number 2, the focus word. Every English thought group has a focus word. This is the most important word in the group. It is the word that the speaker wants the listener to notice the most, and it is therefore emphasized. Stress. It is the most important syllable within the most important word, and therefore the sound in the peak syllable must be heard clearly. 4, the peak. Because the identification of stress is so important for communication in English, native speakers use a combination of signals to make clear which syllable is stressed. These are the loudness, contrastive vowel length, contrastive vowel clarity, and pitch change. Extra clarity and length also happen to give the impression of loudness. So many teachers assume that loudness is the essential lesson elements to teach, but it is more pedagogically powerful to focus students' attention on the systematic use of length, clarity, and pitch, as they are less common signals of stress in other languages. These signals occur together, but it is best to teach them separately so that the student can focus on one aspect at a time. We're going to take a look at this sentence. Who made these cookies? In terms of prosody, this little sentence can have many meanings. Normal, disgust, pleasure. If you place emphasis on individual words in this sentence, the focus word, it changes the meaning. As we just learned in the prosody pyramid, courtesy of Miss Judy B. Gilbert, we have other factors we are concerned about. The stress, the most important syllable in the focused word, and the peak, which is when all the elements of speech come together in the presentation, which includes, but obviously isn't limited to, loudness, contrastive vowel length, contrastive vowel clarity and pitch change, extra clarity, and length. If you emphasize who, you may want to know who. If you emphasize made, you may be asking if they were freshly made or store-bought, possibly even requesting a recipe. If you emphasize these, in my mind I see this as good or bad. And if you emphasize cookies, I see it being a salutation to the chef or presenter or a setup to something bad. Now, here's me with my student. 你是我非常好的学生，谢谢你帮我跟我功课。所以现在我们念这个句子，你帮我跟我功课，谢谢。好，我们开始现在。Okay. Who made these cookies?
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 Super excellent. High five. Yeah.
Adding to Jessica's introduction to and explanation of prosody, Barth, Weingarten, Reber, and Selting state that prosody is understood to encompass all suprasegmental phenomena that are produced by the interplay of pitch, loudness, and duration in syllable-sized or larger segments, and that are realized in an essentially variable relationship to the word selected. In short, prosody is not what we say, but rather how we say it. Since the way we speak involves emotion, it is not surprising that facial expression is closely connected to prosody. For instance, Sendra, Konstantin, Swartz, and Prieto reported that visual cues play an even stronger role than auditory cues. The role of facial expression is more important than intonation for detecting the target meanings. This shows that it is very important to not only use proper prosody when speaking, but using the corresponding facial expression is also key for deriving meaning. Take Matthew's sentence for example. Who made these cookies? Watch how my facial expression changes based on what I emphasize. Who made these cookies? 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 You may have noticed that my expression was questioning for each sentence, but that it only varied slightly depending on the emphasis. For this reason, it is vital that students rely on auditory clues rather than visual to make meaning. For instance, Sendra, Konstantin, Swartz, and Prieto also state that when these same subjects listen to just the auditory input without the visual input, or the other way around, they reported accurate perceptions respectively, and that when incongruent visual input is added onto the auditory input, the final perception changes drastically. This shows that although facial expression is important for both giving and detecting meaning, as far as interpreting meaning goes, it is more beneficial to understand the auditory cues or prosody being used than it is to understand facial expression. In fact, as was just mentioned, visual cues, such as facial expressions, are not always accurate, and when they are not, the listener misinterprets the speaker. Correspondingly, regarding sentence types, Sosa Murcia and Olstein state that it is important for the learner to understand that grammatical sentence types may differ from functional utterance types. This is important information because it shows teachers that students need to not only understand proper intonation for questions, but they also need to know that there are distinct differences in the ways and purposes for which we use language. One way that intonation and prosodic patterns can be taught to students is through the use of the prosody pyramid, as Matthew aptly explained. To reiterate, Sosa Murcia and Olstein state that prosody is essential to being understood. Teaching students what prosody is and how to use it is one way that we as teachers can help students communicate meaning effectively.